Hello, hello. Welcome to Reading Time. My name's Time, and this week we're reading Goodnight, Mr. Tom by Michelle Magorian. Let's get to reading. Goodnight, Mr. Tom is a novel about a young boy named Willie who is sent to live with an older man named Tom Oakley during the evacuations of London in World War II. During his time with Mr. Tom, Will grows a lot, learns a lot, and heals a lot. So this is a great coming of age story. I am going to give this book 5 out of 5 stars, and honestly, it's good enough that I may break my rating system and go even higher than that if I could. This book does have a lot of difficult content though that I'll go into a little later, and I will say I might be a little bit biased to enjoy this book because my favorite genre of all time is historical fiction, specifically around World War II. But even with that slight tendency to enjoy this genre more than others anyway, it is a very moving book. I cried multiple times while reading it, and it made me feel a whole range of emotions. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, as I said, there is quite a bit of content to be aware of with this book, and the biggest one that I think is important to be aware of is that of abuse. So at the beginning of the book, Will is dropped off at Tom's house, and very early on we can tell that he was abused at home. He's covered in bruises and sores at varying degrees of healing. He's extremely malnourished and believes that he's going to be in trouble for any little thing that he does. And he also exhibits some other signs of abuse in childhood, such as bedwetting. Additionally, later on in the book, he does go back to be with his mom for a bit, and we see that abuse a little bit more clearly. The abuse is bad enough that Will blacks out for the duration of it, but we do see the aftermath of it, and it honestly is horrific. So that is something to be aware of with this book. This book does contain examples of physical abuse specifically. However, the majority of the book is about him healing from that abuse and being around those who actually love him and care about him and want the best for him. As I did in my previous video of Matilda, I will be putting links in the description for resources if you suspect someone that you know is being abused, or if you yourself are experiencing abuse. It definitely gets intense at different points, but I found that overall the story really showed that someone who has experienced abuse can get out of it and can experience love and healthy relationships. For substance usage in this book, that is limited to adults consuming tobacco products and I believe alcohol, but honestly it would be so scant that I can't recall. For sexual content in this book kind of has some sexual content, but not in the way that you would think. For one thing, Will is given the sex talk by one of his friends. However, it's not graphic or explicit, and it really is limited to a man's seed and a woman's seed meet together and form a baby. So I don't see anything concerning with that as long as you're comfortable with your younger reader being aware of that basic description. There is also some brief partial nudity in the book, but once again, it's not really sexualized. It's just a woman lifting up her shirt to breastfeed her baby. And Will is initially unsure of what to do with this and embarrassed and a little worried that she's sinning by showing herself, but then he sees that she's just feeding the baby and everything's good. There's one more point that might kind of border on this sexual content idea, and that is simply Will noticing that one of his female friends is developing breasts, because he sees it as she's changing, but she has an undershirt on the entire time, and nothing is really said beyond that he notices it. Because this is a book centered around World War II and specifically centered around the evacuation of the children from London, there is a lot of death mentioned in the book. Because there were bombings in London at the time, a lot of these children either went back home to their families or they lost loved ones in some of the bombings. And so death and loss are additional ideas that are seen quite a bit through this book and are discussed and explored, and is something else that Will learns how to cope with and grow from. Additionally, one character does commit suicide in this book. However, it is not described. We simply know that she did take her own life, and that's it. I will be putting a link in the description of this video for suicide prevention and awareness as well. If you suspect someone is feeling that way, or if you yourself are feeling that way, please feel free to click that link and look into those resources. So obviously with all of that content, I think that this is a book that I would not recommend for anyone younger than high school age. However, when I was looking online about it before recording this video and after reading the book, I did see that some people had said that it was actually assigned reading for them in as young as 5th grade. So maybe with the right student, it would be okay at that young of an age, but honestly, with how dark it can get and how raw it can be, I don't think that I would recommend it for anyone younger than high school aged. So as I said earlier, this book deals a lot with trauma and specifically growing and healing from trauma. And as such, I think it would work perfectly with trauma literary theory and examining the book from the perspective of focusing on the trauma and how it affects the characters around them. Because Will is not the only one who deals with trauma in this book, and we see trauma in many different forms, from the loss of loved ones, recent and in years past, to that of the physical abuse that we see Will experience. I won't go too much in depth with that. If you're interested in hearing more about trauma theory, then take a look at my Hunger Games video that I posted. I talked about that in regards to that series. I think this would be especially interesting to look at though, because Will is sent back to his abuser at one point in the book and experiences that abuse again. And so once he's out of that situation, he does have to kind of relearn how to do some of the things that he had done before in his healing process, and learning that it's okay to be who he is and his own person, and he's not going to get punished for just being him. So once again, fantastic book. I really did love this one, and I'm so glad that the poster had it on there, because this wasn't a book I had ever heard of, and I imagine people are more familiar with it over in the UK, but here in the US I had never heard of it, and I don't know that I ever would have read it without this poster. So this was definitely a big win in my opinion for these 100 books. For this week's poster square, our icon is right here next to the Grimm fairy tales. We have just a little suitcase, which I suppose kind of represents the fact that these children were evacuated and, were traveling a lot with their baggage. I'm not going to go too in-depth with the storyline on this one because I did love it so much and I don't want to spoil everything. I highly recommend it. Please go check it out for yourself. And let me know what you think of this book if you have read it, or if you have any other recommendations, especially if it's something that fits into this weird subgenre that I like of historical fiction, specifically young adult historical fiction set in the World War II time frame. Some recommendations that I have are The Book Thief or Salt to the Sea. Those are definitely both ones that have been my favorite book at some point. I want to take a second to just thank those of you that are returning watchers or are subscribers to this channel. We have hit over 20 subscribers, which I said this when we hit 10. It's a small accomplishment, but it's an accomplishment nonetheless. And I really appreciate all of your support and interest in these videos. Please let me know in the comments if you do have any other recommendations. And feel free to share this video with your friends if you think that they would enjoy this book recommendation. Like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And as always, have a marvelous week and a wonderful read.